So, as you said last week, we studied the. Well, before we begin the actual stuff, I always bring back the tidbits that I get throughout the week. So last week I talked about the idea of Hollywood and it's who you know, not what you know. And I can't believe I forgot to take that to the next context. But think about what you've learned most of your life growing up in church. On the day of judgment, it's not going to be about what you know, how much money you have, how many degrees. It's all about who you know. And it's like, you get to the gates. It doesn't matter what you've learned. It's like, do you know my son? All right, you can get in. That is the pinnacle of when relationship trumps knowledge.
Bro, I'm going to preach that Sunday, man. That fits right in. I'm serious.
It's good.
It's about who you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The Christ, Son of the living God. We like this. Who said that? I did. I thought you meant the preacher.
They probably say it too.
No, it was just a walk-up improv.
So then the second thing that happened last week, so that one lesson I was talking about, your performance is not related to your identity, but even though that's true, you still need to work hard and do your best. So I was doing a final video screening for these kids, and they had worked really hard. And so this is where we were getting pizza, and we're going to show them the video. But somebody at the center, one of the directors, was like, "Oh, everybody should get pizza." And so then I bought pizza for enough kids. And then, all these other kids come rushing in, and they're grabbing pizza before these kids even get their pizza. And it just felt so unfair at the moment. And it just made me realize, thinking about that lesson, the importance of working hard and what, the respect you get from the hard work you do. Like I was saying about the pirating of DVDs. I'm sure that's how a lot of filmmakers feel. Like they do all this work, and then somebody just comes and takes their DVD copies. Here you go, here you go. So yeah, just that. I'll send out the next two things. I'll send out the links. But there's this guy on HBO Sports, and he's like this world Guinness record holder. And I think at one point he might still hold it, the most Guinness. He holds the Guinness record for the most Guinness records too. So he just does this wild stuff. Like he juggles. Then he's like, "Oh, I'm tired of juggling," and I also unicycle. So I got tired of doing them separate. So I decided to juggle while unicycling. He has some record about walking 10 miles with a bottle balanced on his head. So he just does these really off the wall kind of feats. But the guy asked him at the end of the interview, he's like, "You don't get paid for any of this." He's like, "No." He's like, "Why do you do this?" He says, "I like challenging myself." He's like, "This is my way to get closer to God. Just trying to outdo myself over and over and over and making myself see what I can do." And that just made me think about our earlier lessons of, self-comparison. And he's only doing this because he wants to see how good he is to himself. And then the other night on MSNBC, CNBC, one of those, they had BMW, a driving obsession. And it was really fascinating to watch because it was right in line with all of the stuff that's in A Whole New Mind. They were showing the pre-production process before a car ever gets made. They just had these artists with renderings and drawings all over the place. They had a life-size model of the car that they make with clay.
Oh, it is awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they sit there and mold it and, make the little details how they want it. And then they take a three-dimensional scan of the model and put it in the computer and tweak all the little stuff. Then the other thing that was interesting at that interview was they were saying how BMW was making it a point to align themselves with really elite people who were interested in the arts, ballets and operas. Like they throw these parties and stuff, and they really wanted their car's image to represent this sort of artistic elite classiness. Like they were really trying to project this imagery of like, you want this car because you're a classical, music listener, and this sleek curve and design and the aesthetic of this car is very in line with your lifestyle. So I thought it was very interesting. Like when Pink quoted the guy in the book, said, we're not going into the car business, we're going into the art business. And it was funny, they even had two people, they did this shot where you see the assembly line and then they pull out, and they had two people come in and perform an opera on the assembly line floor of the BMW factory. So they're really getting into this idea. I mean, Pink was way ahead of his time when he wrote that stuff.
Where was the fact? Was it the one in South Carolina?
I don't know. I didn't catch the details of that. So that was my little tidbits for the week. So tonight, We got a bunch of stuff to get through. I'm gonna finish up a little bit about last week, the feminine that we talked about. So, one of the things about the feminine side. So last week I was talking about how I associate femininity with creativity. And I was trying to make that connection, and I thought about what my friend said to me once. She said she was trying to get her son involved in violin or piano, but he didn't want to because he was at the age where he felt like, music was what girls did. And then that thought kind of got in my mind. I was like, that just didn't resonate with me because I was like, oh, I just like music. I like piano. I like music. What's wrong with that? Like, I never thought of it as a gender thing. But I think a lot of people do see it. Like, I was reading these books about young men who, when they were little, their brothers and their father, called them these really horrible names because they wanted to stay behind and play the piano while the fathers went out and did quote-unquote male things. So I can see how, creativity could be seen as a more feminine side. I'm sure there's a masculine side too, but...
Dude, the rock star image, I mean... That's like the hyper masculine, position, or the image that the hip hop artists, or like the especially I think of just like the early on East Coast West Coast gangster rap, like hyper masculine but musical.
Yeah, I'd be impressed by that. Or feminine.
Yeah. So in this context, I'm kind of framing femininity and creativity, the idea that we've been talking about. We have choice, we like change, we like the variety, we like colors. So to use a cultural example, my mom's closet, she's got, I don't know how many outfits, I don't know how many pairs of shoes. And it's never enough. It's like it can always be more. And so I kind of take that cultural identity, that cultural example, and just reflect it upon all of us as human beings. Like, we all like the idea of having choice and change. We go to the supermarket. I was there this morning, just cereal boxes, of different types, different flavors. And so I don't think, even though I think this is culturally seen as more of a feminine phenomenon, we all have this desire to want, I can do this with this, so it's, you can get this phone with this color, or with this ringtone, and this ringtone with this color, and with this ringtone, and this skin, and this skin. Like, we all like that idea of combination and being free to have many choices and many variations. So I was just kind of pointing that out. It kind of, connects back to some of the earlier charts where I was saying, how we like design and the iPod, and we all want our own specific thing, our own customized thing, not this one size fits all.
It's interesting. I thought about that later on, and I was like, because the reality is, like, just because you got a different skin for your iPod doesn't mean a million other people have that same skin and that same iPod. And I was like, when we let ourselves... When we limit our creativity to what other people create and we consume, then we really aren't being creative and we're not being individual.
Yeah.
But it's when you sit back and like make your own skin.
Yeah.
For your iPod, stuff like that. Yeah. That's like a step in that direction.
Yeah.
But we like to have that sense of being different, even when it's just we're different, just like everybody else.
And so there's this guy, Pastor McBath, who's down in Norfolk, Virginia. Me and his son went to the same high school. But I thought he had this one analogy. I can't remember what he was using it for. But he was saying, it's interesting at an event. Guys will come in and they'll look around and be like, well, what's everybody got on? Oh, you got on suits? Okay, good. I'm good. I don't look different. He said, but girls are the exact opposite. It's like, I hope nobody's got on the same dress that I have on, or I'm going to go home and change. And so I like that as an idea for all of us. We all have that sense of, like Pink is saying, we want to have something that nobody else has. We want to walk into a place and be like, yep, nobody in here is doing what I'm doing. So, just relating that to what we've been talking about, suppressing of the feminine side, we have to, be sure not to lose that sense of the uniqueness, which I think the feminine overall and the woman both represent to all of humanity. I think that's, when God put the woman in the earth, he was like, this is the representation of creativity and color and change and beauty and spontaneity. All right, so that's that. So, continue on with that. So I think it's interesting how in the book Pink, he describes the right brain as being one that is about making relationships. Like when he talks about when you see a person's face, you're connecting the eyes with the nose and the lips and the ears. It's all about how those things work in unison. But if you think about that word, relationships, it has another context, romantic or family. So I think our right brain is important not just for relationships of connections in the conceptual sense, artistic creativity, but also relationships of people. And he mentioned in the book, the idea that the other book written called The Essential Difference, how men's brains were created for systems and understanding systems, and women's brains were designed for empathizing. This is the guy's theory. And I think it's just interesting to see how the male and female counter each other again. You have... Yeah, I mean, I think there's females who have male brains and men who have female brains. So this gets a lot into what we were talking about last week. There's no just, you are this. But, I mean, there is a general, understanding that most of the times women tend to be more empathetic and men tend to be more straightforward, direct. But I just think it's interesting that it's just... opposing, not necessarily opposing, but just representations of each other just in a different way. So men are more into, systems, and instead of using the word relationships, you can use the word connections. They're interested in how pieces and parts fit together. It's still a relationship, it's just not a relationship of people. It's more about objects. So men are more of the thinking side and women more of the feeling side. To me, that's just fascinating to think about how the two come together and they're doing essentially the same thing, just in different spheres. And I'm just fascinated by that idea of how, like I was saying about the Millionaire Matchmaker, how these guys, they kind of conquered their world and they, figured out how to make all this money, but they couldn't get a date. Like, if you were asked them about the details of a system, how does money work, and you invest this 401k and then you multiply it and then you divide it and like they have all of that down, but then you ask them about the details of people and their brain just doesn't work like that. So I think it's just fascinating to see how men's brains really, in the male brain, works with details of things, and then women have more of that details and understanding of people. You may have heard the term, thinkers feel and feelers think, so there is no just one or the other. Like the people, they may have more of the emotion, but they still think about things. People think about things, but they still feel. Because I think there's this misconception that guys are like cold and distant and they can't feel anything, and you have to like pry through their metal heart in order to ever get some type of emotion. That's the sort of picture that's painted of guys. Like we just have no emotion, we just see stuff happening and we're just like, we're just unmoved, which is absolutely not true. And I think on the flip side, there's this idea that women are just so overcome with emotions that they don't ever think. They're just always led by their heart, feely, touchy-feely. And that's not true either. So just bringing those two things back together again. I also think it's interesting how the word, like we've been talking a lot about how the male correlates with the objective mentality and the female with the subjective. And just looking at those words, objective contains the word objects, so they're more likely to see things from a hands-off mentality because they just want to know the truth of the situation, the raw data. Whereas women are more about the emotion, the subjective or the subject. Like when you take a picture of a person, they say, what is the subject in the picture? So without the female, the male is cold, distant. But without the male, female side is flimsy, has no structure, no undergirding. So I was watching this movie this week. You guys may have seen this documentary. There's one called When the Levees Break, but then I think the guy who made it, he must have made a second one. It's all about New Orleans and Louisiana after Katrina hit, and then after that, the Gulf spill. So they're just showing these people just getting hit over the head 2 times in a row. But the interesting part that made me think about our class was they have Obama. He came down and he was just all serious. He said, I want y'all to know, BP spilled the oil, BP will be paying the bill. And all the guys were like, yeah, Obama, give it to him, be a strong president. But then one guy commented, he said, Obama, he was pretty cool at the beginning. He was tough. But then I felt like he kind of backed off and got soft. He's like, he needed to step up and, start taking names and kicking butt and start showing who's boss. So that made me think about what Pink said about Clinton, how people responded to him, how when he gave that empathetic, I feel you, that people had this knee-jerk reactions like, we don't want a president who feels, we need a thinker, a serious guy. So I started thinking about how it's not that we don't want the president to emotionally react, but it's more about the emotion that he reacts with. So if we look at the Clinton end of the spectrum, he showed a sense of feminine empathy, and that idea was rejected because we wanted a strong male presence, which I think goes back to the idea of, we are suppressed, oppressed, the feminine attributes of humanity. But then on the Obama side, I thought it was interesting that the idea of someone being very wrathful was what we consider to be the sort of default emotion. And I'm going to connect that to this idea of how we see God. So, the idea, we've been talking about being made in the image of God, lowercase g. So every time I look out at you guys, you're reflecting an image of God back to me, whether you're trying to or not. Whether I believe in God or not, it's happening. And so that's why it's important to know that you are a lowercase g God, because everything you do, you're reflecting an image to the world of who God is. And so every time I look at you, this cycle starts to happen where I look at you and then I look towards God, and I'm looking at God, I'm looking at you, and what happens is, depending on what my image of you and God is, that cycle begins, and I can't break out of the cycle. If I see you as wrathful, or I see God as wrathful, I'm going to start projecting on him and projecting on you, or projecting...
God laying in the bed.
You'll find out in a second.
I know. I was like, that's how I explain this picture when you start talking.
So...
It's a process.
So this is what happens. This is why I think it's very important. Okay, so this is a person looking at another person. And so this person says, I hate work. I have to take care of my family. Why do I have to do all these things? So whether you are thinking consciously about it or not, I think subconsciously you start to project that on God. So this person is the image of God, is a reflection. And then what you see in that person is a projection. So then you have God laying in the bed, and he says, Jesus comes into God's room and says, Father, your turn to help the human race. I did it last week. And God says, already? Oh, come on, Jesus, just 5 more minutes. I just want to sleep in. I'll give you some money to take my shift. So it's this idea that, when you see people walking around like robots and they're just going through the motions and they're just like, I hate work, I have to take care of my family, I have to take care of my children, I think we start to project that on God. So when we need help, we're like, okay, God's job is to help us. But I have this image of God that somehow he's lazy, he's lethargic, he doesn't want to get up and help me. I'm an obligation, I'm a chore, he has to take care of me. So relating that to what I was saying about, how Obama reacted, I think that's part of the problem. We kind of look at the Obama reaction of, what people wanted the Obama reaction to be even more, the wrath. We kind of accept that because I think we already have this image of God that he is wrathful, that he is angry. So we just kind of say, oh yeah, that's what's in my head and I see it out there. Yeah, that's right. That's the reaction I'm like. Our brain is default set for negative reactions from human beings and from God. So I think that's why people, were really happy when Obama was like, yeah, give it to him, versus the Clinton reaction where he was like, so we like that masculine reaction, even though it's too far in the wrong direction. And so this kind of also goes, let me see, I got that other chart over here. This older chart where we talked about whatever you let get in your brain, once that cycle gets started, it's kind of hard to break until you introduce some new truth in there to break those cycles. So that's what happens, with this mentality. Whatever we're seeing in this person, we start to project it on God and God on the person, and the cycle just continues over and over until we get the truth into our head about who God is. So yeah, there's just for some reason we have the idea that the default temperament of God is wrath and anger and fear and all of the negative emotions. So, before here's some other interesting charts. So I heard somebody mention this last year, but they were saying there's these 4 quadrants of how you see God, and I had never heard of that. When I heard, I was like, oh, that makes sense. That's probably would have been helpful if I would have known that earlier. So they were saying you either see God, there's 4 combinations. You either see God as near, but he's mean, or you see him as near and kind, which would be the ideal of what we all want, him near and kind. Or we see him as far and mean, which is probably the worst optimal. Or you see him as far
and mean,
but he's kind. Yeah.
No, near and mean might be the worst.
You think near and mean is worse?
Yeah. He's right on top of you, man. You better watch out.
But you could look at it from the perspective of he's far, which means he doesn't care, and he's killing you from far away too.
He's not even care about. He's not even so considerate as to be near to you.
He sends his minions down.
Okay, I can see
Take
that.
care of you themselves.
Or because he's far, he's kind, because he can't see what you're doing.
There's so many variations. But I just thought that was interesting. It made when I was thinking about these emotional, ends of the spectrum, it just made me think about that little diagram. So that's probably one thing to take with you and figure out which one do I see God as and figure out why. So then the bottom third of this chart, something I kind of made up. So you have the present here and then the future here. I think it's interesting how in the present, people fear God's wrath and they don't believe in his love. So, you're in a church and it's like, oh, we cursed up in the church. I got to get out of here. God's going to strike me down. It's like they're very aware of wrath at that moment. But then it's like, nah, man, God loves you. Hey, God don't love me. Look around. Look at the earth. He ain't in love with me. God ain't love. So it's very interesting that presently, that's how some people see things. But then when you look in the future, you say, oh, yeah, one day God's going to bring judgment. He's going to, balance out all the scales. And it's like, God's not like that. He's love. He's not going to be. It's interesting that people don't see, wrath in the future, but they see love. But they see wrath now, and they don't see love now. So it was just another connection I made with the.
So they see love now and wrath in the future. That's what you're saying.
No, I think they see wrath now. Yeah, wrath now and love in the future. So with all this talk of empathy and, beefing up the feminine side, I think that whole thing, why we see God as wrath, part of it is that we only see God through our left brain. So by default, we also turn him into a robot. When we project this only left brain logical mentality, we see God through that, and then what we get back out of that is robotic response, because we paint him as a robot versus a person. So in this chart, God is a robot. We'll look at a couple different things. So this person is down on his knees praying through left brain only. So he's praying to God, but since he's only operating out of his left brain, his transaction with God is one that can only be as a computer or robot. So the emotions that he feels coming back to him are careless, heartless, cold, unresponsive, lethargic, mechanistic, because what else do you expect from a robot? Only what you give it. There's no true sense of relationship.
Can we call him Godbot?
Sure.
Awesome.
So, similar thing on the other side. This chart is going to get the award for most use. This ends up being my favorite chart, I guess. education and the answer. So similar to that idea of the teacher giving Billy the right answer, I think the fact that we're only seeing through our left brains is we project that mentality onto God too. So we get on our knees and we pray, okay, God, I did a lot of good works, and I'll insert this scripture, and I did this right thing. So then it goes into God's left brain, and we expect blessings, approval, love to come back. We treat God like a transaction, like a vending machine, versus like a human being. I think one thing Dan Pink says in Drive, he says, that's how we do treat each other as human beings. We think that a person is this endlessly mechanistic system that if you punch in all the right codes, you're going to get the same response. So he's saying, if you offer people just enough money, they'll work harder. If you punish them with just enough sticks, they'll stop doing bad behaviors. Like, that's not true. So then he goes on to tell all these, studies that show how people didn't respond how you thought they would to the behavior modification.
It's our penal system.
Yeah. More people incarcerated than any other country in the world.
So I think
Recidivism.
like using that word relationship again, I think that feminine side of God, and then like our diagram last week with the two halves created by God, male and female, the fact that we don't recognize the female part allows us to not have a relationship with God. We forget. It's interesting to me. I've been thinking over this past couple of years. Like me and Ebony were talking about this past weekend at the retreat.
Wait, when you say female part, what do you mean?
Well, the female brain or female half.
Different directions.
I just say female half of God, the part of Him that is more about, typically associated softer emotions, compassion, grace.
It's easier for a girl to see God with the relational aspect, because He's like a father. If a guy sees God, as like, I don't know, it's a little bit more homosexual, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, we're going to talk about a little bit about it. I think what you're saying is true. I think it is, this article that I just sent out the other day was talking about, where are the men in the church? And they were saying they felt like a lot of men sort of shied away from church because it does typically cater to, quote unquote, more feminine kind of things like grace, compassion, mercy. So I think a lot of guys do have a hard time connecting with Christian themes because they want that sense of more strength, power, being omnipotent, so to speak. But yeah, it's like, something you made me think of. I think it's like the idea that the church is the bride of Christ. But yeah, guys have a hard time relating to that. It's like, well, how am I supposed to be a bride?
So for
Even if passionately love Christ. Sorry.
That freaked me out. I was in a choir in college, and one of the things that the chaplain did for like our spiritual development was actually like walk through a marriage ceremony, like with us, sort of between us and God. And still to this day, it kind of freaks me out. The wrong side of this line. Like, it's just to embrace that thought is still to this day is extremely difficult. To see God as like the ultimate alpha male who like just gotta follow him because he runs the show, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But to see him as like the romance part, I'm sorry.
I feel like that would be hard for a guy.
I'm glad you understand that.
Yeah, but it's also a matter of thinking of it with your right brain. Mm-hmm. Because of the fact that it's a spiritual truth.
Yeah.
It's not, and then also for us to remember that some of these things that are in the Bible are things that we can't fit into the earthly box.
Yeah.
Because it won't make sense. It just won't make sense.
And we feel, I think we do need to feel free to also say that there's a reason that the Bible is full of countless metaphors for God's relationships with His people and different people among us and different cultures, even in the world, will resonate with different aspects of the way God relates to His people. It's not to say that you can just pick one and say all those other ones, whatever, because there's, like you said, you can't just leave them aside. And so, as a guy, you need to kind of deal with the fact that, like, what does it mean for God to be passionate about me? Like, wow, that's something I need to think about. And in the dissonance, it draws us into to understanding more of his character. But there are always going to be those metaphors that really just like right off the bat, like, yeah, I can think about God as a king.
Yeah.
Because I can think about being a servant to a king. I can do that. Just tell me what to do. You know?
But you know what? Women struggle too if they had a bad relationship with their fathers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, really, struggle with that.
You know, it's
Oh, yeah.
not just, you know what I'm saying? It's not just a shoe-in for females too.
Well, yeah, because there's this guy, he always makes a joke. He says, you know, all the men are the bride of Christ and all the women are the sons of God, so get over it.
I like that.
Well, I just read this article. It was really interesting. I don't necessarily know what I think yet, but it was talking about sex in heaven and how there'll be sex because we'll still, you know, sex is more about gender than it is about intercourse. And he was talking about we'll still be male and female, but there will be no need for intercourse because there will be this ultimate intimacy that we can't really conceive of on earth because we think of the ultimate relationship as the marriage relationship on earth, but the ultimate relationship in heaven will be our relationship to God, and so there will be sort of a greater intimacy there that has nothing to do with gender, which we don't have here because all of our relationships, I think, are sort of seen through the eyes of our gender, but it'll be something more how like the Trinity operates in unison. And in such a deep intercourse, not physical but a spiritual intercourse.
But
Yeah.
how can we bypass the possibility that the creation of Adam and Eve was not metaphoric? You know, Adam being God and Eve being a part of him being us.
I think if it wasn't for me, if it wasn't for Jesus talking to the Sadducees saying, like, well, in the kingdom of heaven, you know, no one will be given into marriage. Like, you'd be like the angels, you know, in that sense. If it wasn't for that, like, you couldn't convince me there would be sex in heaven. Like, are you kidding me? Like, one of my favorite things, not in heaven. Like, come on.
But it's a physical act, so why would it be in a spiritual place?
Well, heaven is hyper physical, even like what we said, even what your poem said. But that's the thinking that we got to get out of. That like, heaven is.
But it'll be a new heaven and a new earth. So, and no need for the physical expression of earthly things.
Oh no! I think it's more physical than it ever is now. I think we'll really understand physicality in heaven. Like, and heaven is here, and it's like that image you had of the fire sweeping across, and like grass is more grass, and trees are more trees, and bodies are more bodies. Like, we're given a heavenly body doesn't mean disembodied. It's a real body.
I don't mean disembodied, but I do mean that a higher level of consciousness that's higher than the physical. You know, like what she was saying about.
Yeah, I don't know what I think about that, but I thought it was interesting.
Yes. Intercourse, if you think of it literally, it's intimacy. It's not just a one-use word type of word.
Right.
So I just think we'll be so. I think that what we do physically here is so elementary compared to what it's going to be.
Yeah, he compared it to like, you know, like a child wanting something, but not knowing that there was something greater. So of course they want this elementary thing because they have no concept of what's greater. So they're like, yeah, give me candy, but they have no concept of
never even having to eat food because they're fully satisfied already.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was something like that where we can have a concept of what that level of intimacy and ecstasy that will exist in. So why would you want something that was lesser than that? And then that level of intimacy and ecstasy you could share with God and with other people and not be necessarily in a married relationship.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but
It's
I
like
thought it was interesting.
Jesus still tasted wine when he came into his kingdom.
When he came into his
He said, I will not drink of this cup again until I come in my kingdom. You know, like I won't have wine again until I come in my kingdom. Is basically, you know, a way to look at that. And I'm like, yeah, there's a reason.
Yeah, but see now, how do you?
We could say metaphorical wine, but I just don't think there's any reason.
Yeah, I think it would really be wine.
I think you do. Because when you say cup, I think of
Yeah, Father, take this cup from me.
I will not taste this. I will not experience.
Drink of the fruit of the vine is what he said.
I will not take part in this experience. Cup meaning responsibility.
No, but I think he said, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to remember that. Anyway, that's, we can stay here till 10 o'clock tonight talking about that.
I know, because then that could be metaphoric too.
We're getting off topic.
Sorry, Bernard.
Take it away.
I will.
I love doing this. I used to be on the debating team.
So we were talking about, last week we were talking about empathy. And, when I first did the description of this course, I put this topic called the right answer versus empathy. And I think when I say the right answer versus empathy, meaning there's a way to do things, but I think that right answer mentality leaves out the empathetic part. Even though it makes sense, it doesn't make human sense. So to give you a first example, Joseph Prince was talking about how, Jesus healed on the Sabbath, and these people were getting all angry. And he said, don't you see that Jesus was angry at these people because this man had to work, he had a family, and you're sitting there talking about these rules that weren't made for the sake of the rules, but they were made for the people. And I think that kind of gets into the idea of law versus grace. Like, people are very heavy into the law, but they discount the grace. It's like you have the law, which is there to help us, or it's supposed to, it's given by God. You don't discount it, but you don't just only do the law. Like, there's a grace to it. And if we look, the thing that makes me think of it, if you translate that example to modern day, it's like, you go to your boss and you're like, well, my best friend just died and I want to go to the funeral. Well, I'm sorry, you used up all your sick days and your personal days, so I can't let you go. If I let you go, it's this idea of, we have to do the right thing versus seeing this whole human being saying, yeah, okay, they used up all their sick days, but what about that part of them that lost their friend? We can't always do, quote unquote, the right thing. We have to include empathy in the equation. That was a good story that didn't happen to me, but I was there to witness it. Wayne got a new phone from Sprint up the street.
Who, Wayne?
What?
Who got a new phone?
Me. So I go in the store and I'm getting my phone, and this girl comes in and she's talking to the guy at the front desk. And then there's somebody out in the truck waiting for her. And I thought they were married, but I guess they were just boyfriend and girlfriend. So then she says something to the guy at the front desk. She's like, I just need to get my phone taken out of his name. And so then the guy comes from out of the truck and he's all like, I had your phone turned off. Oh, big deal. You'll have to get a new phone, do something for once in your life. And he leaves in the truck and I'm just watching this. I'm like, wow. So the guy at the front desk, he's trying to help her out. And she's like, just take my name off the account. And he's like, I was so surprised because you don't really see this much day in business world. He was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He said, you don't want to do this. He's like, relationships. He's like, you and I both know that, this isn't the end for you guys. You need to go patch this up. And she's like, no, there's nothing to be salvaged. He's like, I know. You're just in the heat of the moment. You're doing this out of anger.
Are you kidding? Are you serious?
Yeah, I was so shocked. I was like,
He probably seen too many people do this and be like, I ain't trying to get caught up in this foolishness. Go talk to the dude.
But this was the interesting thing he said. He said, honestly, I'm about to make a lot of money off this transaction of canceling your plan. He said, but I care much more about you, fixing that than me getting paid. And I was like, wow.
And it's true, though, right? Because if you cancel, you get like a cancellation fee.
Yeah. So I just thought it was really fascinating that somebody who could have went by the rules and, in Sprint contract, you're required to be an employee and get money and blah. He was like, no, I see the whole story. I'm not just going to do what the rules say, even though technically I'm supposed to.
Wait, did you end up canceling it?
I didn't stay for the whole sitcom. He tried to help her out somehow, some way. I don't know.
You should have sat down and take notes, man. Turn on your new video camera on your phone.
You could have formatted that.
But there's this quote by this rapper. This guy is named Jafai Life, and at the beginning of his album, he says, sometimes in life you have to break the rules to set free your heart. And I've always followed that quote. And some people was like, oh, we can't do that. It's like, well, yeah, people want to take that quote out of context. You can't just do whatever you want, especially the idea of, somebody, abortion, I need to go kill these abortion doctors to set. It's like, no. That's not what we're talking about. Not just doing whatever you want because it's going to set free your turmoiled heart. But the example I use is, so you have this guy, right? And he sees this girl every day after class, and he's like, all right, I got to talk to her. And he never gets up the nerve to do it. So then finally one day, he's sitting in his dorm room, and for whatever reason, this surge of energy hits him. He just feels invincible. He's like, all right, I'm going to go do this right now. So he runs across campus, and he busts into her classroom with 300 people in the lecture hall, and he's like, Jenny, I couldn't wait. I got to tell you, will you go out with me right now? Now, according to college policy and campus rules, you're not supposed to disrupt the professor and blah, blah, blah.
Is he a student?
Yeah, he's a student.
And this is a professor?
He interrupts the professor's class, yes.
And he's a student. He's not supposed to do that at all.
Exactly. Yes, you're not supposed to do that. But I think in the moment, all of the guys would be like, man, that dude's got guts. And all the girls are going to be like, oh, and then the professor would probably be like, you interrupted my class, but what a great story. I mean, things like that where the rules don't really matter, I think is what we're going for, where there's times where you can break the rules in order to help someone or just see that whole person, even though we're technically, quote unquote, supposed to do the right thing. And I think that just ties in, to this robotic image of God. The fact that we don't see the empathetic part of God, the compassion, the mercy, the grace. It's all throughout Psalms. He's always describing himself. God is long-suffering, full of mercy, compassion, his mercy. Like, we, for whatever reason, haven't ascribed all of those attributes to God because they're too feminine. We're more in love with the masculine, wrathful, powerful, he will crush you mentality. And I think that affects us too, because then, we see ourselves trying to do something for God, and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, well, I'm not allowed to do that. That's against, like, for whatever, we see God's projection down upon us as one that's not empathetic. Like, we try to do things and we think that we're going to get in trouble because we can't see his mercy, his grace, his compassion.
I used to know all those names of God that describe the attributes. Mm-hmm. Is it El Shaddai? That's called, it's in Hebrew, it means the breasty one.
Many-breasted one?
Yeah, the breasty one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we just haven't read that part of the Bible.
Yeah.
It talks about God being, some feminine attributes and names and,
Well, I think that's why perhaps Jesus was so controversial, because he just did things outside of the box, like healing on the Sabbath. They're like, you can't do work on the Sabbath. And he's like, I think I can heal somebody on the Sabbath.
I made it.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
or a man talking to a woman because he didn't, there's no Jew nor Greek, male nor female, slave nor free.
Yeah, he did all these out of the box kind of things that were kind of unspoken cultural rules and norms that he continued to sort of break. And I think kind of that's what even God wants us to do, break out of these.
And he came in a human suit to show us how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that was the most empathetic right there.
Yeah.
As I always say, empathy talks about putting on somebody's shoes. Like, he literally put on your shoes, your feet, body, knees. He literally put himself in your shoes. A couple other stories about empathy. My aunt, she used to be a guidance counselor, and she was saying how there were these kids who could get the free lunch program, but for whatever reason they couldn't get the free breakfast. So the cafeteria workers would have to say, oh, I'm not allowed to give you this. But then 10 minutes later, they're just dumping out pans of grits into the trash. And it's like, what kind of sense does that make? Yeah, it makes sense by the rules, but does that make sense that you're going to dump out this food anyway, and here's this person who can't afford it? You could just give it. So I think it's interesting that all of this intellect, we lose the common sense. We have all of this brain, oh, so wonderful, but we can't figure out simple, common, human decency to help people.
Well, I think for this case, if they give these 10 kids, then 2,000 other kids are going to come and want free grits. And you just got to stop somewhere. It's like me when I'm sitting on a plane. I ask ask stewardess if I can sit in the first class seats because they're empty. And she said, no, I'm sorry, you can't sit there.
But I think there's a difference between you sitting in first class and some kid eating food.
I was like, oh, I got a headache. Can I rest there? And she said, no. See, she don't have common sense too.
I think that's
Or you just need to learn how to ask, because when I ask, I get put in first class.
Really?
Yeah.
When you're on the plane? When you're on the plane and you ask?
I ask before I even get on the plane, man.
How'd you do it?
Can't do it, man. Because you got to develop your right brain.
I'm left-handed. My right brain is super strong already.
All right. So the last thing on empathy, if you guys ever seen the movie Fight Club,
One of my favorite movies.
There's a great scene.
It's so messed up.
Yeah, it's a guy movie. But there's an interesting scene. So this guy, he's going through Edward Norton's character gets insomnia. So he finally finds a way to get to sleep. Is when he's able to cry. So he goes to all these self-help meetings, even though he's not really a part of, it's like testicular cancer.
I forgot about this.
Wait, I forgot about that.
But he doesn't have any of these ailments of all the self-help he's going through. So this other girl starts showing up, and he's like, I can't cry when there's another faker in the room, so you have to leave.
Wait, she's a faker?
She was a faker too.
Yeah.
And what's she doing there?
Same thing he was.
Yeah, she said it was cheaper than the movie and it was free coffee. That was her rationale. But the interesting part of that scene that I thought was so fascinating, he asked her why she came, and that's the answer he gave, the coffee in the movie. And then she asked him why he came, and he said, when people think you're dying, they listen. I mean, they really listen. And then she cuts him off and says, instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. And he was like, yeah. And that line always sticks with me. I think that's what we have now. Like, we don't have people who we don't really listen to one another. We're just like, yep, problem, Okay, so this is what you need to do. Like, we just want to give our answer and our fix it, but we don't really just kind of sit and intake and really let ourselves be filled up with someone else's problem. And even just listen, like, not even try to solve it, but just like, yeah.
I have problems with that.
Yeah, I think I think we all have. I think men maybe more, but
just listening and not want to solve your problem.
But honestly, I think we all as human beings do that.
You know how your jokes go.
I think we all as human beings play that male, because there be times when I'm talking to my friend, male or female, you're trying to explain something and they're just trying to give you answers, and you're really inside, you're like, look, you don't know what my problem is. I just want it to be heard. Like, you're just really frustrated, and you're just like, just listen. I just wanted you to say,
why didn't you tell them at the start?
Because I don't know, we're human. We just do crazy stuff. But
you think it's going to work out.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to say it.
Yeah. But if it repeatedly don't work out, then you're going to press them
Well, then you have to tell them, like Bernard did. Shut up! I just want to talk.
Okay, so the last few things. Back to the wrath. We enjoy this, or we think that the default temperament of God is wrath. There's a couple of interesting stories around that idea. Well, I think we seek that part of God that is strength and power, but it's gone all the way to the part of the judgmental, wrathful kind of God. But we much rather have that than the weak, kind of kind, merciful God. Even though we want that towards us, it's something about us needs to see the picture of Him as strong.
But do you think that whenever you use those examples of like Obama and the other one, Clinton, and even our image of God, do you all think that that's because these are all positions of leadership? Could it be that we need to have strong kind of masculine leadership more so?
Or masculine leadership?
I'm sorry, not necessarily. Masculine-like qualities, because you know what I'm saying. You can have a woman who is a strong leader as well.
See, I don't know. I think that's...
crave a strong... What I'm saying is, do we crave strong leadership?
Yes, and I should say. There's nothing, though, like, for me, when somebody's trying to be a strong leader, like that doesn't do it for me. But like there's nothing like seeing like someone lead, but not like some of the best leaders I know don't lead from the front. They don't lead as the directive, strong, this, like they're the ones who are standing back, and people are going ahead of them, and they're seeing nuance, and they're just little thing here and there. They're not always the shepherd right out front, waiting for the sheep to follow. Because that automatically puts me as a sheep. But I think a good leader, actually, rather than being directive and decisive and very controlling and like masculine in that way, is actually the better leader is more nurturing and pulls out leadership qualities in others. But we've been culturally brought up with like the best leader is like the strongest one, the guy who beat all the other guys up so he gets to be king.
There's leadership for like different situations. When you're dealing with like a large group of people, and that's the question, like how are we going to get this people from point A to point B? That nurturing, like guiding, very intelligent about people.
Yeah,
is very necessary. But then there's that other kind of leadership which we rarely do need nowadays. A leadership that stands against chaos, stands against things that we don't understand.
Yeah.
Stands against like tsunamis, floods, stands against gods that we don't know or quite yet. That leadership, we don't need it today, but that's the leadership that we still kind of crave. Yeah. Somebody who's able to impose their will upon this world, and we live, survive, flourish by the fact that they're able to impose their will. Like, they're really strong about it.
Yeah.
We don't need it today. We have nothing that we don't really understand.
Or we need a leader who can be both. Who understands the necessity to lead in different ways in different situations, which is Dan Pink's a whole new mind. Like we need somebody who can be the directive, decisive. We need somebody who can be the empathetic, caring, nurturing, and the reality is that's God. It's how Israel, how I've longed to gather you to me. Like chickens, like my little chicks, and it's the do this, and don't do this, by the way, directive. It's the strength. It's Jesus coming. It's God on Mount Sinai with lightning and thunder, and it's Jesus in a manger as a baby. And it's Jesus teaching the masses and telling them what's up and throwing over tables in the temple, and it's Jesus weekly dying on a cross. Sorry, y'all, I just started preaching.
Sorry. No, I think it's
true. Offering for this man.
I was in a training, this lady, when she finished, she said, she talked to us for a long time, and she said, sorry I got all preachity.
Preachity.
But where I was going towards was, so I have a friend, and I remember she told me this story about her and another friend of mine. They were together at Bel Rio, and like something about a boyfriend was, I don't know, he was being like stern with his girlfriend, or he thought the girlfriend was cheating with this other guy or flirting with this other guy. So the two of them had separate reactions. One was very like, oh, that's very, I was afraid. But the other woman said, I actually was kind of like, I wish a guy would have stood up for me and fought for me like that, even though it was very aggressive. So I think, I've heard things about that too, where there's girls who, they kept staying with this jerk guy, even though you're watching him on TV and you're like, what is your problem? This is the 15th time. But there's something about even though he treats me like a jerk, it shows his confidence. So I think that's how we've kind of attributed to God. It's like, well, he may be wrathful and full of vengeance and we have to deal with that, but at least we know he's strong. So we've gone way too far over here, where it's like, no, somewhere in the middle, it's like, yeah, God is strong, but he's also gentle at the same time. We don't need this overbearing, wrathful God in order to feel secure, because actually it terrifies us. Because how are you going to pray Yeah, how are you going to pray to the robot God like this, and you don't feel like he has any sense of kindness or wanting to hold you? It's going to be very hard to feel any kind of empathy from that kind of God if you think he's a robot.
Yeah. Man, can I share one more thing? Just this Sunday, I was teaching the kids, and we were talking about Jacob wrestling God. And so I had one of the kids from church, Seth. I talked to him beforehand. I was like, Seth, when I tell you to, man, we're going to be downstairs on some carpet. I was like, I just want you to come at me with everything you got, man. Come at me hard. And I knew he would do it too. And so before we read scripture, before we did anything, it's all right, guys, let's get started. Seth, bring it. And he just came running at me in the air, just like jumping on me. And I wrestled with him for a while. We went back and forth. We're going. And in the end, like I got him in a hole. And I said, all right, guys, at the beginning of this, who did you think was going to win? They're like, you. And I'm like, why? They're like, because you're strong. And I was like, yeah. Now I've got Seth right where I want him. You think I'm going to hurt him? And they said, no. I said, why? They're like, because you love him. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to read y'all a story.
That was good.
Good. So, this is kind of just a fun little thing in between. I had made this for an earlier lesson, but it didn't work. So,
very good. I like the beard.
And so,
someone we know without the glasses.
Without the glasses.
Is that a self-portrait?
Contact lenses on the day.
What did he say?
He said contact lenses on the date, huh?
So, just the idea of how the right brain is oriented towards relationships. I just kind of made this comic to show how even in the dating world, we've gotten robotic. So on the robot side, I've got, oh, you must be tired. No. Did it hurt when you fell? No. I lost my phone number. Can I? And then this girl's thinking, oh no, here it comes. So even in dating, guys are taught to have this, you got to have this memory bank of lines when you go up to a girl and approach her. You can't be yourself. You can't just go out there and not know what to say and just hope whatever happens. It's like you got to have this stuff rehearsed and say the right thing at the right time and say it just the right way and look at her just, it's like we've become very robotic even in the way we're romantic. Versus over here where I say be yourself. I said, hi, I'm Bernard, a creative catalyst. What's your unique interest that no one else in the world has? What will I say? What will she say? Hi, that sounds interesting. Most guys try to be something else. This is refreshing. So you may or may not get that answer. You may get the get out of my face answer too. But at least you're yourself. So I need to learn from this too.
I was gonna say, yeah. So you do that.
I mean, I think in group context, I'm more comfortable because I'm myself. But if it was just like one-on-one, I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I mean, I don't use stupid lines or anything, but it's like when that moment happens, I'm just like, I gotta say something. I gotta say something cool. Like I can't just be myself. So yeah.
All right, let's hear one of your lines.
Yeah. Let's hear one of my lines.
Something cool.
I mean, it's more just like trying to be.
Evan line.
Yeah.
I don't have a line.
I used to go to pick up girls easier than anything, and it's because I never used a line. Not once. It doesn't
Girls
work.
knows
What
this.
would you do?
know
Size them
lines.
up and then ask something?
Yeah, but sometimes they like the lines if they're romantic.
People know lines. I had this guy that was trying to date me, and I swear, I'm like, you say this to like every girl you're trying to date.
Yeah.
It's nice stuff. Cut the crap, man.
Yeah.
I don't have any lines. It's just more like, I don't know, try to be witty in the moment. Even though I'm already naturally think witty, it's just in that moment the pressure and the fear kind of makes
At a
up.
party, potato chip. Man, can't eat just one of these.
Woo! All right, so going back, talking about the male compartmentalized emotions versus the female integrated emotions. I think one reason that
Wait, is that true, or is what? So men compartmentalize like that,
for the most part,
and for girls it's all connected. Huh? Okay.
so
Don't use generalities.
yeah, so for the most part, that's the disclaimer. So I think using the example I said, how we see. I think one reason that it's easy for us to categorize God as just sort of just one thing, he's wrathful, he's angry. It's harder for us to see his feminine, quote unquote, feminine attributes because it's a lot more messy. Like, this is simple. We can deal one thing at a time. Oh, he hates me. It's not positive, but it's easy to manage. I'll take the hate. You know, rather than saying, okay, well, God is compassionate, but yet he's merciful, but yet he's just, but yet he's also loving. But like, it's just, our brain is just like, I don't understand all this. He hates me. Like, we just go with what's easy, even though it's not beneficial, versus trying to really figure him out. And I mean, I think you see that culturally too. It's like, you know, even though it's portrayed in sitcoms, which I think a lot of times is dumb, but it's like, you know, how does the guy, he doesn't know what to say to his wife. Like, this is a ticking time bomb. You know, what is she going to, you know, she's got so many things going on inside. So it's easier just to run away and be in fear than to approach something with such complexity.
I like that word better. Complex.
You ever see Modern Family? You guys ever watch Modern Family?
Maybe like a part of it.
The dad on there is like really empathetic. You know, he's like really just engaged, empathetic, but a complete idiot who misses the point all the time. Like, man, we can't get one good, like, you know, empathetic male image. Like, if a guy's empathetic, then he's stupid.
Yeah.
You know, and he just doesn't. He misses the point the whole time.
So I think we do this with women. I think we do it with our feminine side as a human race, and we do it with creativity. Like, it's much easier just to do something simple. I mean, I think there's a time for simplicity, but some of the most beautiful things are obviously complex. You know, the universe is very complex, but I think people are very much in this simplified, like, oh, we don't have time to get involved in all the details of that project. Just give us a quick mock-up because we got to get this. So I think people don't know what to do with creativity. If you go into, like, a lot of these Dan Pink concepts, if you were to go into a company and introduce this, they'd be like, oh, well, this sounds great and all, and it sounds fascinating, but what are we going to do with it? I don't know how to implement this. Let's just stick to what we've been doing, simplicity. So I've listed a bunch of these before, but these are the bad words currently: negative connotation, subjective, emotional feelings, touchy-feely, circular reason, personal time.
Why is personal time bad?
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you're at work and you're trying to do something, you do that on your own personal time.
Oh.
You know, don't bring that up into the business world. That's for you to do at home. And I might comment on that a little more later. Feminine side, heart.
Heart is good. Why is that?
Because, you know, people make fun of it in these TV shows, like, oh, you had a feeling in your heart. You know, like, that emotional side is seen as something as too much like a girl, and in that context of girls are less than men, you don't want to be a girl because a girl speaks from her heart. Oh, let's share what's in our heart, our feelings. Like, that's all. Comedians always make fun of that. Like, well, my girlfriend wants to share feelings. So
feelings is up there too.
Yes, feelings is up there. Intuition. Don't even say cry. If you're a guy and you say I cried, you might as well just end all your male relationships. Illogical. I think it's very fascinating how people use the word illogical as if to say that, you know, anything that's not logic is not accepted here. You know, if you say that, it's people
Illogical is almost, you know, stupid.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the word ignorant, which doesn't mean stupid, but people use it like that. It's, you're ignorant or illogical.
What does ignorant mean?
I think it means like unaware. You know, you could be ignorant to a car coming around the corner to hit you. It doesn't mean you're stupid. You just didn't know.
Ignorant means something totally different.
Yeah, that's the slangified word of ignorant. Bad concepts. Try to get into these two, at least starting the commitment in time, spending time. I associate all these with very feminine attributes on a whole, but also, you know, you tend to see these kind of things amongst women more than men. Community, help, collaboration, vulnerability. If you're a guy and you're vulnerable, obviously you're weak, you're gay kind of mentality. Touch. We only touch now if it's sexual touch. But the idea of just like putting your hand on somebody's back and feeling that sense of human touch, we don't really do that anymore. Beauty and aesthetics and support.
Well, I also find it so ridiculous in the church. It's like, in some churches, it's like, you can't even hug people.
Yeah.
Or men give you these awkward side hugs. It's like the worst thing.
Have you guys seen Give Me That Christian Side Hug?
No, but it's the worst.
Oh man, it's this whole Rabbits church, dude.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, but
or a hug?
Yeah, the total A-frame. That's the most unsatisfying hug.
It's horrible.
Like, oh, you got a great collarbone. Like,
Yeah, I know. It's got no intimacy at all.
yeah.
No, but the thing the church is afraid is that some people take advantage of it and get sexual with it. So to do away with all that, just
Right, nobody's going to hug for the 5% of people that are perverts.
5%. Oh, that's 1 in 20. That's a huge number.
We hug in our church. Every Sunday.
So I won't be able to get through all of this, but I'm going to start.
Why don't you choose the good ones?
So the ideas of time and commitment, and we're going to use those. I think time and commitment are very, like I said, that are associated with feminine attributes, more in the context of relationships. It's like, are you going to commit to me in this relationship? Or are you going to spend time with me? But I like using that as an analogy for art projects. So the first thing I'll start off with is the part versus the whole, complexity versus simplicity. So I read in this book by Rob Bell, Sex God, he said, most people think that affairs in marriages start because of lust and just sheer temptation. He said that's part of the equation, but really the biggest issue is one spouse looks at the other spouse and says, I no longer see anything of interest in you that's worth finding. So boredom is the foundation, I think, as he's saying, because, okay, so say you have this cartoon here, boredom with the wife. So this guy, he's like, see you later tonight. They're both going to work. She says bye. He walks outside the house, sees this, attractive neighbor, hey neighbor. She's not even being seductive. She's just saying, hey neighbor. The only reason that he's tempted by her is because there's a deficit here. If that was fulfilled, even though this may be tempting, it wouldn't be this overwhelming draw. He might be like, yeah, that might be fun, but no, I'm committed to my wife. I got this long-term thing. I don't want to mess that up. And I think the thing that we forget, because we're bombarded with these messages of, lots of money, lots of women, lots of men, like this idea of multiplicity of things. So we forget the idea that God created each person to be with one. And if you were to stay with that one person for long enough, you could find the infinite complexity within that one versus trying to go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. Because bottom line is you're going to keep repeating that cycle because you're going to get bored with this one eventually, and then that one eventually, and that one. So the whole goal is how do I recreate that first mystery that I had with the person I was with so that it seems like it was from the beginning. You have to keep doing that.
How do you do it?
I mean, one idea is, you ask the person who you're with, how was your day today? That's something that's unknown to you. That's simple. That's one thing. And if you go back to here, part of the problem, I think, is, once people get close to one another, like if you just look at the blue outline, that's the whole. So to this guy, this woman becomes my wife. Like she just becomes this reduced thing to this is my wife, versus seeing her as a complex individual with, oh, she went to college, oh, she was a teenager once, oh, she had a childhood, oh, she's somebody's sister, oh, she's somebody's track. Like she's your wife, but to other people she's a multitude of things. So to discover each one of those things, you have to take time. Like, oh yeah, I didn't know what you were like when you were 3. Why don't you tell me? You get to learn the person in a new way. And I think that applies to projects too. Like a lot of times I think artists, they get on this one project and it's all infatuation and they love it and it's like, oh, this is great, and then they get bored. And it's like, rather than going on to the next project, why not stick with this project and fully delve in and find the infinite complexity in the project. And if you can't see it, bring somebody else on and be like, hey, I haven't seen this project in a new way in a long time. What do you see? Can you tell me? And then let that inspire you. Or we had a professor at architecture school, and he was just one of those crazy professors. And he would always come in during a review when we had all our models and drawings pinned up. And he'd be like, can I take your model? And he would just flip it upside down. Just to start off everything. He's like, you just see something different when you flip it upside down. Like nobody else would do that, but he just had this understanding of you're going to see something new when you change your perspective. And he would always do that. And I was like, wow, interesting. Simple, yet, new. So yeah, you have to rediscover love for your wife or your project Well, I think it's applied to everything. I think every moment of life has possibilities in it. It's just, are we becoming aware of them? So taking this idea of boredom to work. So in this cartoon, I got Johnson. This is Johnson's boss. Johnson, here's some more reports on reports about reports. So Johnson is already overworked with reports, as you can see. So down here in his cubicle, he's tempted. Should I look at YouTube or should I do my Excel spreadsheets?
YouTube. He's multitasking actors.
So here we see the deficit of his heart. It's the same thing. People get all uptight about work, like, oh, you shouldn't let people get on Facebook or Google and MySpace because they'll be distracted. They're not distracted by MySpace. The only reason they're distracted by Facebook or MySpace is because they're bored. Just like this husband. He's only tempted by this wife or by this neighbor if the relationship here is feeling void. So the reason that people surf the internet at work is because their work is not fulfilling them.
But not everyone can do interesting work, right? Someone's got to do the tough stuff.
I don't believe that. I think everybody's made for a specific passion, and
so you're saying that there'll be some people who find Excel spreadsheets very.
Yeah, I don't understand those people, but some people love.
Oh man, I know some people like work at this chemical plant, and they took such great joy into creating the most complex, formula-laden Excel spreadsheets that could do the most complicated chemical engineering equations in a sheet.
Yeah.
And they loved it. And they loved explaining to everybody exactly how it worked, even if they didn't care.
That was stimulating. What if you're just data entry? Does anyone actually enjoy that?
I think some people love this. I think people would understand how we like, artistic stuff. They just don't understand sitting around and strumming on strings. It doesn't do it for them. I think we're just all different.
Yeah.
Some people love math problems. I mean, they love it. They will sit there all day and work and work and work. I mean, some people just
Some
like.
people won't necessarily love it, but they may not be bored by it.
Yeah.
Well, and because I think the way our culture is developed is like forcing people to do things they don't like. And the reality is, if we would have all done things that like really we're passionate about, I think our culture would have developed in a completely different way. But because we substituted a passion for money for a passion for what you do, like Henry Ford, who had to pay people 5 times the amount of the typical automotive worker to get them to work on an assembly line. Nobody's passion is to work on an assembly line.
Yeah.
But but some people are more able to like say, oh, you know what? Yeah, like I can do this and I'm fine. And they're more inclined. Whereas some people like us, like, shoot me in the throat. Please.
You know what plays a big part in that too is work ethic. Mm-hmm. Some people's work ethic is different, and when they go to work, even though they have stuff to do, they may get on Facebook and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Even though they have stuff piled on your desk.
Yeah, I think, but if you have stuff on your desk or on Facebook, you really like doing that stuff.
So I'll finish on this chart.
People are always on Facebook after lunch, from my observation in the office. Right after lunch, that's when everybody logs on.
We're going to watch a video where the guy encourages employers to let their people get on Facebook and Google and everything. Because he's saying, why do you shut off your employees from the rest of the world where that's where the connection and the collaboration is going to happen? The only good thing that can happen, good things can happen because you're allowing ideas to come in versus saying, shut off the outside world and focus on this Excel spreadsheet. It's like the world doesn't live in an Excel spreadsheet. They live in Google and Facebook, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, well, but then you got that a whole other thing where you're being paid to do work.
Yeah, and the employers just want robots, basically.
Yeah, no, they want an even exchange for what they're giving. If they're giving you 8 hours of pay, they, minus breaks, you're really stealing time.
I agree with working for what you're responsible for, but I think at the same time the employer's sense of what should be allowed to go on that level should be more lax.
And it can't be because, I deal with performance management, and sometimes people make errors because their mind is divided. They say the Bible says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So if you're there to do my work for my department, and then you're talking to your friends on the phone, or you're texting them, or you are on Facebook, you're double-minded.
Yeah.
And you make errors, and then I have to write it in your performance management.
Is this video you're going to show us? Is it the one? Is it? I don't know if it's related to the guy who's like. There's a couple companies in Charlottesville now that are doing it, and some other companies that's kind of a growing trend. You don't have hours. You don't have a required amount of hours you have to be in the office.
Well, I like the shot. Just finish your work and get out of there.
And it's like you have your task
Results only work
environment.
Yeah.
You know, and that's that. And that's so you go to work and it's like, yeah, today, man, honestly, like I just am going to sit on Facebook or I'm going to read some articles today, and I know that next week this is due.
Yeah.
And
That's if you have a sort of a creative, more flexible type of work. Because like most companies,
like assembly line work, results only means put the part in there every second and a half.
Every widget, make your widget.
I mean, I think a lot goes in that. Like the people in the assembly line, I think part of it is too. The people should enjoy their job. You have people that are like messing around. Part of it is probably they're not motivated internally. They're like, I don't want to be here. And I think, like for me, like I said, the guy in the chart, like if I was that guy and I really love those Excel spreadsheets, I would question like, okay, wait, is this worth it being on YouTube to like waste company time and get off? I was like, no, that's not, like the longer term picture was matter as I get on YouTube. I think those people will be self-motivated. But I think just giving, like Google, just giving people that more free environment where they feel like, hey, I'm not a slave, you know, I'm not a drone. You know, if you get on Facebook, like it relaxes you, like if that relaxes you for a few minutes and you need to get back. I mean, I think if things are so like
I think the only place you really need to be that strict about time is when you're doing manufacturing or assembly, when you have to get out of a problem. I think that if you're not overworked, most people can get their work done in 8 hours a day. And the fact is that when we didn't have these electronic things, people were just around the coffee machine. You know, like
water cooler.
People were just doing it in other ways. It's like nobody goes to work and just sits there. You have conversations. Even when we had this, internet blogger at my job, and we talk all the time, and it actually makes for a better work environment. Oh, yeah. You go to get your work done, and then you have in conversations about work or about whatever. And my boss is totally lax. Obviously, we have working hours, but totally lax about stuff. He's like, I don't care. If you're here when I need you, you get your work done, and you're not off gooping around somewhere, but, he doesn't care because he actually gets reports about our internet use. And he was like, I don't even look at it.
I haven't talked to my boss in 2.5 months.
Are you a remote employee?
I mean, my boss is the head of a bunch of collegiate ministers, and the guy who was there before her, there used to be this middle person in between her and him, and he was the one who would be, making sure everybody was doing stuff, and really being like, okay, let's talk, how are things going, let's, how are we doing, and he left. And then we were all, every one of us was like, she was like, what do you think about replacing him, this and that? We're like, we don't need it. Like, we don't think you need that much knowledge about what we do. And we can just check in and send you some reports every now and then, or you call us when you want to know what's happening. But we think we're better off with, we didn't need him. He was only good to tell you stuff we were doing. He didn't help us. Because then we're better off if you let us really spend the time not doing reports, but focus on our particular place, and it's been so much better. I mean, she doesn't care how much I work, how much I don't work.
Stepping up hard. I still think that's an effective means. If I'm ever at an organization, I'm like, look, be here when I need you, or accessible. Do your work, because I think that you'll be a much happier person. If you can do 8 hours of work in 4 hours, I'm going to pay you for 8 hours. Because you're a badass. Yeah. You should go home. Hang out. You know what I mean? Go home and hang out with your family and do
you earned it.
Right. You earned it. If you're that smart, why should you penalize people for being really
If you give people 10 minutes.
Anything my boss gives me, I'm done with it in 2 seconds.
That's the way.
So they could just send me home.
When I was in the military, they paid me less than $4 an hour, and I was so much better than the other clerks. And so as a result, I didn't do work a lot because I felt that I was being abused, but it was just part of the system.
Yeah.
It's a crime to be smart, And so I found myself sleeping a lot. I was
Singapore felt real secure.
No, that's what happens when you have really intelligent people.
I know,
at work. I BS because I literally can get my work done and I just get it done. And so I'm like, I could be at home right now.
Yeah.
So I get frustrated.
Sleeping on my couch.
Doing whatever I want to do. Have another job. But I think we have societies like that. Like if you said, get all your work, there's places where you need to be there. Like part of my job is needing to be here for people to come in and answer the phone. I'm not understanding that. But I bet if you said to people, you get your work done as fast as you can, and I'll still pay you for 8 hours and be here in meetings I need to. I bet everybody would get their work done.
Yeah, but they might be careless, right? They get it done too fast. That's something.
No, but you know that it was related to your performance.
Yeah.
Like so you can't just do anything.
I mean, I think there's a lot of pieces to it, but I think ultimately it comes down to, number one, finding a job that actually suits your abilities and that you enjoy. Because if you care about it, you're going to do it well. Like when I come here, I'm not just like, I can't wait to get in the garden and get out of here because this is so lame. It's like, I love this. I will stay as long as you need me, you know? There's no force. I'm just like, okay.
I'll hold you to your word, Bernard.
You got a good boss, Bernard. Man, that's what's hard.
Man, you got a great boss, Bernard.
Anyway, we digress again. Oh, and it's like 10 after 9.
Oh, wow.
Shut it down, Bernard.
All right, I'll try to give you a quick summary of this. So basically,
The man talk.
the summary of this chart is, okay, so people, we don't find the infinite complexity in our projects. So what happens is there's a lack of commitment, and commitment is related to time. People, we've gotten into the mentality of what I call use once and destroy mentality, or one night stand mentality, or fast food. Since, there's not enough. Since people get bored with a wife or a project, they're like, I'll just use this, and then when I'm done, I'll get rid of it, or her, and then they move on to the next one. So I think that's why you see a lot of this promiscuity, not just of people, but of projects. People never ending because they don't stop and sit and say, what is in this project or this person that I can keep delving into and keep delving into? So then you have a lack of commitments. I don't have time to go into all this stuff, but basically, I'll have to finish this time and commitment thing next time. But pretty much it's the idea of we never finish anything because we're trying to do too much in one day. And there's this mentality that the world has kind of given us that there's never enough time. We're running out of time. We got to do things faster. And I think one thing that can help us renew our mind is Joseph Prince is talking about how we're always so obsessed with time, but yet we're in relationship with the person who created time. So even though we can't control time, he controls time. And, the idea of restoring the years that were lost, if you wasted your first 20 years of your life, God can give you favor and grace over that to, make your productivity faster so that it's as if you got your 20 years back. So we'll get more into that. I'm reading this book called In Praise of Slowness, which is really good. It just talks about slowing down.
I'm going to read that after you're done.
It makes sense, because I think it's mainly we were created for the sense of eternity. And then that got cut short to 70 years, but there's still this longing to want to do stuff. And our mentality would have been like, we got all eternity. Well, what's the rush? We'll get to that eventually. If we move on, we'll come back. It's like, why we don't not have time? It's just eternity. So I think that desire is in us, but yet we only see 70 years in front of us. So we're like, 75 years. Got a lot of stuff. And this is what happens. You end up feeling number 1. Number 15, it makes you feel good to just try it. It's like, I can cover all this ground. But none of it gets done. Nothing is complete. You've started a lot of things, but nothing gets complete.
That's why I stopped trying to do anything creative other than write music for a while.
That's good. It's really good. And I think part of that fear is that, if I'm not looking interesting, I got to be a mover and a shaker. Yeah, what's Evan doing? He's writing a song. I'm over here on the film set now. I'm off. Like, we have this sense that we have to look interesting to everybody. So if we're doing mini projects and people are like, he's always doing something.
Photography, this, that.
Let me see one of your photographs. I'm not finished yet. Let me see one of your movies. It's still in the works.
No, that's how I am with my books and plays. I have so many ideas that they're just not finished.
So we'll continue with commitment and time next time.
I love it. That's so meta.
Yeah,
We're talking about commitment and time.
Yeah, what?
6 books I'm reading.
We're trying to fit too much. We're trying to fit too much in one day. And we don't